So, there's perhaps no greater hot-button issue in gaming right now than microtransactions, the means through which video game publishers seek to further monetize their releases because apparently a customer's day-one spending is not enough anymore. Microtransactions by themselves aren't inherently an evil thing that is single-handedly eroding the industry's sense of artistry and integrity, but they are frequently implemented in predatory ways which seek to undermine the experience of players who refuse to splash out that extra cash to skip time-consuming currency grinds. And while in many cases there's not a whole lot players can do about loot boxes and whatnot beyond simply voting with their wallets and not using them, there are some creative and determined players that have nevertheless found ways to game the system themselves. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 ingenious ways players beat microtransactions. Number 10. Cheating to buy unlimited loot boxes. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Though Middle-earth: Shadow of War was released to largely positive reviews, critics and players alike were heavily critical of Warner Brothers' decision to include loot box mechanics. And yet, within days of the game's release on PC, players managed to cheat their way around this rather unsavory feature. Using the game modding program Cheat Engine, players were able to generate infinite amounts of the in-game currency, which could then be used to buy the game's equivalent of loot boxes, silver chests, and war chests. This cheat effectively allowed players to buy unlimited loot boxes and unlock majorly advantageous gear far easier, even if legendary unlocks were still walled behind the acquisition of gold, which is the game's premium currency. Loot boxes were finally removed from the game entirely 9 months after its release, possibly due to it falling far short of Warner Brothers' sales expectations and so likely failing to generate the massive microtransaction revenues that they were hoping for. Oh, I feel so bad for them. Number 9. Tweaking your internet settings to bleed the casino dry. Grand Theft Auto Online. Now, we're using the phrase bleed dry metaphorically here, of course, because Grand Theft Auto Online's money is digital and is therefore an endless resource. An entire article could be written on the near countless glitches and exploits that players have discovered to wring free cash out of this game, which, as of last year, was still generating millions of dollars a day in microtransaction revenue for Rockstar. And one of the more creative glitches involves tinkering with your console's internet settings while at the game's Diamond Casino. By altering your hardware's DNS settings during play, you're able to trick the game into letting you repeatedly win at these gaming tables. After winning once, stand up from the table and change something in your character's appearance, which will trigger an in-game load and, per your altered online settings, dupe the game into repeating the hand that you just played. You can then return to the table and basically play the exact same hand again, netting you more money. Better still, in the event that you do end up losing a hand eventually, you'll simply be disconnected from GTA Online before your loss can be registered server-side, meaning you'll only ever win money while gambling this way. Again, this is one of many exploits that players have discovered in GTA Online over the years, and considering the colossal profits Rockstar is bringing in regardless, it's hard to feel even remotely guilty about using them. Number 8. Exploiting a glitch to farm unlimited resources. Dead Space 3. Whether you've played Dead Space 3 or not, you'll almost certainly remember the ferocious backlash following its release, due to EA's decision to implement microtransactions in the single-player campaign. Dead Space 3 allowed players to purchase in-game crafting resources with real money, a feature which developers Visceral Games were reportedly forced to include by EA. However, within just a single day of the game's release, players discovered a glitch in the game's 8th chapter, which allowed them to effectively farm infinite resources by simply entering and exiting a bunker which continually respawned new items upon re-entering. These resources could then be used to craft in-game items and negate the temptation to splash out actual cash on additional resources. Hilariously, EA responded a few days later by claiming the glitch wasn't in fact a glitch at all, insisting that this was a deliberate workaround for players who didn't want to invest in microtransactions and that they had no plans of patching it. Needless to say, most players maintained that EA simply didn't want to invoke any further ire from the fanbase by patching it out and decided to take a PR win by claiming it as a purposeful decision. After all, Dead Space 3 was released less than a year after EA infamously won Consumerist's Worst Company of America award, so players had very little desire to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Oh yeah, I'm sure it was a glitch. Yeah, we'll believe you on this one, mate. Number 7. Cheating to unlock premium cosmetics for free. Assassin's Creed VALHALLA. Within mere weeks of Assassin's Creed VALHALLA's release, PC players found a way to acquire premium cosmetic items which would typically require a brutal grind or, of course, spending a ton of real money on Helix credits. By using the ever-trusty Cheat Engine tool, players could access an inventory editor that simply let them unlock the premium packs such as Berserker, Valkyrie, Draugr, and others without spending egregious amounts of time or money. Hilariously, the the cheat even allowed players to obtain items which hadn't actually been officially released by Ubisoft. The tool still works to this very day, more than 18 months after Valhalla's release, with Ubisoft perhaps realizing the futility of their prior attempts to sanction PC players for circumventing microtransactions on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. After all, this cheat can't be used on console versions of the game, so it's possibly more trouble than it's worth for Ubisoft to try and shut it down. Number 6. Embarrassing EA into removing them. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, Star Wars Battlefront 2's launch will forever be remembered as one of the most disastrous in video game history. So catastrophically did it dent EA's already uneasy relationship with players. Shortly before the game's release, critics playing review copies of Battlefront 2 noted that it was loaded up with loot boxes and pay-to-win mechanics intended to heavily encourage players to spend real money and speed progression up. By grinding it out the old-fashioned way, it was estimated to take around 40 hours to unlock a single hero, and as a result received enormous blowback from customers online. When an EA rep reported that this was an attempt to let players feel a sense of pride and accomplishment at unlocking these heroes, it rightly became the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. The player response was so vitriolic that EA ended up removing all microtransactions from the game before launch, reportedly at the additional behest of an incensed Disney. While the slow progression remained an issue until EA simply unlocked all of the heroes for all players a few months later, the whole debacle was a major shot across the bow at EA and the AAA games industry in general, with EA shedding $3 billion in stock value following the controversy and lawmakers around the globe consequentially investigating the legality of loot box mechanics. It was certainly a win for gamers and a loss for EA on the balance of circumstances. Number 5. Glitching to get infinite energy in breach mode. Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Deus Ex Mankind Divided was widely criticized for Square Enix's decision to include microtransactions in the game, both for credits and praxis kits in the single-player campaign, and also chipsets in the game's breach mode. Now, chipsets are used to buy booster packs and premium items in breach mode, but rather than splash out on the packs to receive energy boosts, players soon enough found a glitch which allowed them to generate basically infinite energy. By following a series of steps, you're able to permanently boost your max energy, not only avoiding the temptation to spend some cash on microtransactions, but also making it far easier to obtain the game's Platinum Trophy, which requires the player to complete breach mode. Almost 6 years on, Eidos Montreal still hasn't bothered to patch the glitch out, which, given that Breach was very transparently built around microtransactions, is really quite surprising, but you know what, is a pleasant outcome to be sure. Number 4. Cheating to farm silver coins. Wolfenstein Youngblood. Wolfenstein Youngblood launched in the summer of 2019 and saw Bethesda be immediately pilloried for the game's excessive and often confusing implementation of microtransactions. Within a day of its release, players fought back by using the cheat engine to generate theoretically unlimited amounts of silver coins, which could then be used to unlock cosmetics, upgrades, and consumables, all without grinding it out the hard way or spending real-world money. Sadly, players' run of the loot was actually short-lived though, as Bethesda released a hotfix to close the exploit just 4 days later. And yet, between the generally indifferent reception to the game and weak launch sales, which saw it unexpectedly bested by Fire Emblem The Three Houses, Youngblood was largely forgotten by players within weeks and likely did paltry business for Bethesda, all things considered. Number 3. Letting Bethesda accidentally send you free currency. Fallout 76. Now, if all else fails, simply just let a game publisher royally screw things up and just send you a ton of free currency by mistake. That is exactly what happened with the oft-beleaguered Fallout 76, which last summer encountered a glitch where some players were just randomly sent hefty amounts of atoms, the in-game's currency, which can be bought with real cash. Some players reported receiving as much as 50,000 atoms, which if you opened your real-world wallets would be around $500 in spend. Given that Bethesda received intense criticism for the price of items in the Atomic Shop when the game launched in 2018, the feeling of schadenfreude is very real here. Now, Bethesda, of course, suggested that players should not spend the ill-gotten money, adding that anyone who did so would risk being banned from the game altogether. Though Bethesda seemingly patched out the glitch quickly enough, there doesn't seem to be any sort of reports of players being banned for spending the loot, which would have been a terrible look for a game that is still trying to shake the stink off of its disastrous launch all these years later. Number 2. Using a remote play script that auto-grinds credits. Gran Turismo 7. Now, Gran Turismo fans have a storied history of finding ways to circumvent the long grind for credits, from using a rubber band to automate A-spec grinding in Gran Turismo 5 to rinsing a glitch in Gran Turismo 6 that let you farm 20 million credits in just 3 minutes. But with Gran Turismo 7 coming under intense scrutiny for its frankly brutal car prices, and the developers even patching in price hikes to further encourage players to spend real money on credits, some very clever players came up with a staggeringly creative way to automate the grind. By using Sony's Remote Play app on PC, PC, players can run a script which automatically repeats the same race over and over and over again, potentially farming up to around 20 million credits per day. Considering that players need to acquire over 400 million credits to buy every car in the game, amounting to hundreds of hours of running the same repetitive races given the meager amount of launch content, letting your PC do the heavy lifting while you sleep is certainly an appealing alternative. It's a shame that a game as fundamentally enjoyable as Gran Turismo 7 is encouraging players to do this. And number 1, using an exploit to get free mother base coins. Metal Gear Solid Online. Metal Gear Solid 5's online component was launched in beta on PC several months after the game's release, and less than a day after the beta kicked off, players discovered an exploit which allowed them to acquire mother base coins from the store without spending any real money. Unsurprisingly, Konami was quick to act once word of this exploit spread around online, going as far as to shut the PC beta down for an entire day while they prepped a hotfix to remedy the issue. While the exploit was sadly short-lived, players were able to fill their boots for that short window, and in a surprisingly not awful move by Konami, they allowed players to keep any items bought using the exploit, though they did claw back any stolen currency that was remaining in players' accounts. To be fair, after the disaster that was Metal Gear Survive, they should let us keep that currency for repayment of time wasted. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 ingenious ways that players beat microtransactions. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, and the same handle over on Instagram, RetroJ, but the O is a 0. But before I go, my friend, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect. Consider this to be my little microtransaction of positivity that you do not need to pay for, my friend. Just pay that forward to yourself instead. A little bit of good vibes. I hope that you're doing well. Hope that you're smashing your life goals today, and remembering that you are a big ledge above all else, and you deserve love, happiness, and respect. Go out there and smash it, mate. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.